Hello, my name is Alexis and I'm 33 years old. Recently, I've come out of one of the most challenging periods of my life and I want to share that journey with you. It all began with my ex-husband Russell and his mother, Lori. Russell and I met in college and our connection was immediate. We quickly fell in love, and after about 5.5 years together, we got married. Our bond felt strong, but there was always a looming shadow: my mother-in-law, Lori. From the moment Russell introduced me, Lori made it clear that she didn't approve of me. Her criticism and insults stung deeply, especially as I already struggled with insecurities about my appearance. But I clung to the belief that Russell loved me for who I was at heart, which offered some comfort. 3 years into our marriage, I decided to leave my job and start a business with my best friend. It was a big risk, but Russell supported my decision. At first, things were slow, but our business grew steadily and soon became very successful, allowing us to live a comfortable life. However, Lori's attitude toward me never changed. She dismissed my achievements and even accused me of overshadowing her son. Russell's silence during her constant tirades only deepened the strain in our relationship, leading to frequent arguments. I felt utterly alone, as though he never defended me, which created an ever-widening gap between us. Things took a darker turn when I stumbled across messages between Lori and Russell. She had been trying to set him up with other women, and to my horror, I found derogatory comments about me in those texts. At first, Russell resisted her attempts, but over time, I noticed that he began to show interest in the women she was suggesting. The discovery shattered my trust in him, leaving me hurt and questioning everything about our relationship. I knew I had to confront Russell about what I'd found, and I planned to do so the next day after work. But fate had other plans. That morning, on my way to work, everything changed. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed, surrounded by the sound of beeping machines and the concerned faces of nurses. My head throbbed and an overwhelming thirst took over, yet my body felt weak. I managed to ask for some water, and after quenching my thirst, I tried to rest, hoping that sleep might ease the pounding headache. As I shifted in bed, I suddenly realized with shock that my legs wouldn't move. At first, confusion clouded my thoughts, but panic quickly set in. I called for a nurse, explaining that I couldn't feel my legs. The nurse immediately notified the doctor, who rushed in to run tests and assess my condition. Just as the tension in the room was rising, Russell entered, his concern etched deeply on his face. He tried to make sense of the situation, hovering as the doctor continued the evaluation. After several tests, the doctor delivered the devastating news: I was paralyzed. Russell, visibly overwhelmed, quietly left the room, likely trying to process what he had just heard. Alone, I struggled to come to terms with this life-altering reality. Sensing my inner turmoil, the doctor advised me to rest and reassured me, despite my protests, that sleep was impossible with so much on my mind. He explained that the medication would help me relax and that, despite the severity of my spinal injury, there was still hope for recovery. The progress, however, would be slow and require intense effort. It was a lot to take in, but that small sliver of hope made a difference. Understanding the challenge that lay ahead, I made a quiet vow to fight for my recovery. The doctor stressed the importance of proper nutrition and rest, not only for my paralysis but also for the other injuries I had sustained. His words gave me a thread of hope, enough to ignite a fire of determination within me. After the doctor left, the nurses filled me in on the details of the accident. I had been broadsided at an intersection, which caused my car to crash and left me with severe injuries, including spinal cord damage, a broken collarbone, and facial bruises. To my shock, I learned I had been in a coma for 2 weeks. The accident had been caused by a drunk driver who had been arrested shortly after. Anger and frustration bubbled up, but knowing that justice was being served gave me a small measure of comfort. After eating a small meal and taking the medication the doctor had prescribed, I soon fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up the next day, the room was quiet, save for the steady hum of the medical equipment. That's when I noticed my mother, sitting in a chair nearby, resting her eyes. I called out softly, and my voice startled her awake. As she rushed to my side, her face showed a mix of concern, relief, and overwhelming love. Our reunion was emotional, filled with silent tears and tender gestures that conveyed everything we had both been feeling. In that moment, my mother's presence became a profound source of comfort, reminding me of the strength and support I had in my fight to recover. Alongside that comfort came a mix of guilt and gratitude. I felt guilty for the worry I had caused, but incredibly grateful that she was there by my side. I felt an immense relief to still be here, fighting through the aftermath of everything I had endured. Holding my mom's hand, I turned the focus to her well-being, asking how she was holding up. She smiled softly, giving me that familiar, motherly response, putting my pain before hers. Though she was relieved that the medication was sparing me from the worst of the pain, I could hear the fear in her voice. Despite her efforts to stay strong, her concern for my future was undeniable, and it struck a deep chord within me. I tried to reassure her, promising to be cautious and careful in my recovery, but her reflections on the unfairness of my situation brought to light just how random and cruel life's challenges can be. Our conversation shifted to talk of recovery. Though the path ahead was uncertain, we clung to hope. My mom's unwavering support, regardless of what the future held, was a source of immense strength for me. Yet when Russell's name came up, a shadow darkened the moment. Since the accident, and especially after the news of my paralysis, his absence had been glaring. His lack of presence was a painful void I couldn't ignore. My mom, just as puzzled and concerned as I was, promised to reach out to him. Her protective instincts kicked in, determined to find out why he hadn't been there when I needed him the most. As sleep began to overtake me again, I was overwhelmed by a sense of loss and betrayal. Russell's brief interaction before the diagnosis, followed by his sudden disappearance, left me questioning his commitment and whether I could count on him to support me through this ordeal. When I woke up, the scene that greeted me was tense. My mother was on the phone, her voice sharp and filled with demand. It was clear she was talking to Russell. The pounding in my head returned as the medication wore off, leaving me fully aware of the pain I was in. But even through the physical pain, the emotional sting of his absence hurt just as much, if not more. I quickly summoned a nurse who administered the necessary medication to ease my discomfort. Once the pain subsided, curiosity got the better of me, and I asked my mother about the heated conversation I had overheard. At first, she tried to brush off my concern, clearly distressed, but I could sense there was more to the story. With a little more coaxing, she revealed the truth. She had been arguing with Russell. Russell, it turned out, had been spending time with friends and had barely visited me during the 2 weeks I was in a coma. The realization hit hard, layering emotional pain on top of the physical agony I was already enduring. My mother had finally lost her patience with him, scolding him for his dismissive attitude and lack of care. She had laid down an ultimatum. He needed to visit within the hour. While I felt a mix of embarrassment and gratitude, I knew her action was necessary. Russell did show up, but he wasn't alone. He brought Lori with him. Seeing her only heightened my discomfort. The absence of Russell's support was already weighing heavily on me, and Lori's presence made everything worse. My mother, sensing the tension, excused herself, leaving us alone to talk. I confronted Russell about his absence, but instead of an apology, I was met with cold indifference from Lori. She didn't hesitate to imply that my condition had rendered me useless to Russell. She even admitted, without a hint of shame, that Russell had considered staying by my side, but she convinced him otherwise. She pointed to the struggles we had before the accident and my inability to contribute financially due to my paralysis, as if these were valid reasons for abandoning me. Her words were a brutal blow. It became painfully clear how fragile our marriage had become, and how little regard they both had for me in this new, devastating reality. Russell, influenced by his mother's harshness, confessed that my paralysis had changed his feelings about honoring our vows. Through sickness and health no longer applied in his eyes. His blunt admission shattered any remaining hope I had. Lori, as always, didn't hold back. She claimed Russell deserved better and reduced my worth to my career success, which was now threatened. The cruelty of their intentions became fully apparent when Russell announced he would be filing for divorce, and Lori, smugly triumphant, told him she had already arranged a date for him immediately afterward. It was a stark betrayal. As they left, abandoning me when I needed them most, I was left reeling, grappling with the devastating reality of their abandonment. My mom returned shortly after, and her presence brought me a small measure of comfort. Through tears, I recounted what had happened. She was furious, her anger a reflection of her fierce love for me. Though she hadn't been able to confront them in time, she stayed by my side, a pillar of strength, as I cried myself into a fitful sleep. The next day, the divorce papers arrived. Signing them felt like a cold formality. As I did, I couldn't help but notice the look of triumph on Lori's face and the relief on Russell's, a bitter reminder of the cruelty of being abandoned by the person you thought would stand by you through anything. I thought Russell had truly loved me, especially at such a vulnerable moment. The weeks that followed his abandonment were some of the darkest of my life, consumed by deep depression. It felt as if a vital part of me had been stripped away, leaving my world devoid of color. Yet through it all, my mom remained my silent stronghold. She didn't need grand gestures. Her presence alone was a quiet testament to her unwavering support. She brought me my favorite meals, fresh flowers, and comfort in ways only a mother could. Her strength helped me face each day, even as I struggled to navigate the overwhelming changes ahead. After my diagnosis and Russell's cruel departure, I was eventually cleared to begin physical therapy and start a regimen of medications aimed at managing my paralysis. A skilled physical therapist was recommended, and my sessions were scheduled to start in a week. But in truth, I felt defeated, with no desire to do anything but remain in bed and wallow in my grief. I missed the first couple of therapy appointments, a clear sign of how deeply I had sunk into despair. My mom, patient as she was, finally reached her limit. One afternoon, she confronted me, expressing her frustration with my continued withdrawal from life. I tried to explain how utterly defeated I felt, how pointless everything seemed, but she wasn't having it. She told me, in no uncertain terms, that I still had the power to change my circumstances, at least to some degree. She challenged my passivity, arguing that even the smallest step forward was better than staying stuck in my sorrow. Her words struck a chord. She pointed out that while my body might be compromised, my intellect and spirit were still intact, and I could leverage them to reclaim some control over my life. She even suggested that proving Russell and Lori wrong might be just the motivation I needed. The thought of regaining even a fraction of my strength, of showing them I wasn't as broken as they believed, resonated with me. Taking her advice to heart, I hesitantly agreed to start working from home. At first, it was partly to appease her, but also to escape the persistent encouragement that I knew was well-meaning but hard to hear in my state. Yet surprisingly, that decision marked a turning point. I stepped back into my role in the business, thanks in large part to my best friend and business partner, who had skillfully kept things afloat during my absence. Her visits were infrequent, dictated by the demands of our work, yet each one served as a reminder of the life waiting for me beyond my self-imposed isolation. This small shift toward action marked the beginning of a long journey of recovery and self-assertion, driven by my mother's unwavering support and the realization that succumbing to despair wouldn't undo the pain but could deepen it. Upon returning to work, I lightened my partner's load, and our team welcomed me back with warm smiles, concern, and palpable relief at my renewed involvement. I reassured them of my well-being and quickly found my rhythm again, much to my mother's delight. This positive shift paralleled my commitment to physical therapy, which I attended 4 times a week. Despite the initial embarrassment and challenges, I was determined to push through. The catalyst for my renewed sense of purpose came unexpectedly when I stumbled upon a Facebook post by Russell announcing his remarriage. The post, with its thinly veiled jabs at our past, ignited a fierce resolve within me, not just to recover but to excel beyond my previous achievements. What started as anger transformed into a powerful motivator, fueling my dedication over the next 5 years. The journey was far from easy. The first 3 years were dedicated to regaining my ability to walk, a milestone I celebrated with the help of a cane. The following 5 years were focused on driving my business to significant success and recognition, a testament to my hard work and determination. Yet true satisfaction eluded me until an unexpected opportunity for retribution arose. In a twist of fate, Russell's company began to flounder just as mine was positioned for growth. We proposed a merger under terms that favored us, granting us considerable control. Walking into the first meeting post-merger, cane in hand but standing tall, I relished the look of shock on Russell's face, a silent victory. This moment represented not only a personal triumph but also a new chapter in my professional life, one where I could finally put the past grievances to rest. With each confident stride, my heels clicked against the floor, echoing the strength I had reclaimed. I stepped into the room, a living testament to my recovery, a sharp contrast to the frail image Russell had last seen. As I announced my new role as CEO, I laid out the upcoming organizational changes, hinting at a streamlined team structure. While the implications were broad, the message was unmistakably clear, especially to Russell, who was now the prime candidate for dismissal. After the meeting, Russell confronted me, unable to mask his shock and confusion. He accused me of deceit, but I simply clarified that his absence had kept him in the dark about my potential for recovery. a potential that had fully materialized. When he suggested that revenge motivated my rise, I dismissed his claims with the same cold indifference he had once shown me, making it evident that my ambition far exceeded any desire for petty retribution. As he pleaded for professionalism, he shared personal news about expecting a child, but I recognized that this moment was not about reviving old grievances. It was about moving forward, asserting my strength and independence in the face of adversity. My success and recovery were no longer shackled to the past. They were stepping stones toward a future I was determined to build on my own terms. When Russell invoked his need for stability in light of his impending parenthood, I couldn't help but recall the very words he had once used to belittle our relationship. The irony of his appeal did not sway my decision. I informed him that his termination letter was already prepared, marking the end of his tenure. His reaction, a mix of shock and indignation, reflected the abandonment I had felt during my darkest times. As I left him to grapple with the consequences of his actions, a surge of empowerment coursed through me, a stark contrast to the vulnerability I had once known. Later that day, Lori's attempts to vilify me through calls and messages only reinforced the righteousness of my actions. Her insults were met with a reminder of her role in the unraveling of my marriage and well-being. While this exchange was bitter, it underscored the profound transformation I had undergone from a position of helplessness to one of strength and resolve. The sweetness of this victory lay not just in retribution but in the affirmation of my resilience. The support and encouragement I received during my lowest moments had been instrumental in this journey. I learned a valuable lesson from the depths of despair. The only direction left is upward. With each step forward, I moved away from the shadows of my past, embarking on a path defined by my strength, determination, and newfound independence.